This episode is presented to you in the form of an audiobook. Before the book of Judges opens, the story of Joshua draws to a heartfelt and serious close. Joshua, the strong and faithful leader who guided the people into the land the Lord had promised, gathers the tribes for one final speech. He speaks with the weight of history behind him, reminding them how the Lord had brought them out of Egypt, walked with them through the wilderness, and given them cities they did not build and vineyards they did not plant. Now that the land has been largely conquered, Joshua knows his time is near. He challenges the people with a clear and timeless call. Choose this day whom you will serve. Then he declares with conviction, "But as for me and my house, we will serve the Lord." The people respond with a strong voice, saying they too will serve the Lord and never turn to other gods. So Joshua seals their decision by making a covenant and setting up a large stone under an oak tree as a visible reminder of their promise. Shortly after, Joshua passes away at the age of 110. He is buried in the land he had received, and for a while those who had lived during his time continue walking in obedience to the Lord. But after that generation fades, a new one arises, and with them things begin to change. With no central leader in place after Joshua's death, the people face uncertainty. They still need to complete the task of taking possession of the remaining parts of the land. So they turn to the Lord and ask, "Who should go up first against the Canaanites to fight for us?" The Lord answers them, saying that the tribe of Judah will lead the way. He assures them that he will deliver the land into their hands. In response, Judah turns to his brother tribe, Simeon. He makes a proposal. "Come with me into my land and help me fight the Canaanites. Then I will go with you into your territory." Simeon agrees, and the two tribes unite their strength. They prepare to go to battle, not alone, but with each other and under the promise of God's presence. With this unity, Judah and Simeon march forward. They confront the Canaanites and the Perizzites at Bezek and defeat them with the Lord's help. In this battle, they strike down 10,000 men. While in Bezek, they capture a king named Adoni-Bezek. After defeating him, they cut off his thumbs and big toes, a brutal act that mirrored his own past cruelty. Adoni-Bezek himself acknowledges what is happening. He confesses that he had once done the same thing to 70 kings, making them eat scraps under his table. He says that God is now repaying him for what he had done. After this, they take him to Jerusalem, where he dies. Judah's victories continue. They attack and take Jerusalem, setting the city on fire. From there, they move to fight in the hill country, the Negev desert, and the western foothills. They push deeper into enemy territory, going after the Canaanites living in Hebron, a city once known as Kiriath Arba. There they strike down three powerful figures, Sheshai, Ahiman, and Talmai. From Hebron they continue their campaign and target Deborah, which was once called Kiriath Sefer. At this point, Caleb, a respected warrior from the earlier generation, offers a bold reward. He promises to give his daughter Aksah in marriage to whoever captures the city. Othniel, Caleb's nephew, rises to the challenge. He captures Debir and is given Aksah as his wife. After their marriage, Aksah speaks with Othniel and encourages him to ask her father for a piece of land. She also personally approaches her father. When she dismounts from her donkey, Caleb asks what she wants. She says, "Give me a blessing. You gave me dry land, but please also give me springs of water." Caleb grants her request, giving her both the upper and lower springs, showing both generosity and care for her future. The Kenites, who are related to Moses' father-in-law, also join the people of Judah. They move together into the wilderness near Arad in the southern region of Judah and settle there. Meanwhile, Judah and Simeon continue their campaign. They strike down the Canaanites in Jephthah and rename the city Hormah after destroying it completely. Judah then advances to seize important coastal cities, Gaza, Ashkelon, and Ekron. The Lord remains with Judah during these efforts, and they successfully take the hill country. But they face a challenge in the valleys. The people living there have iron chariots, and Judah cannot drive them out completely. Hebron is officially given to Caleb, just as Moses had once declared. Caleb pushes forward and drives out the remaining sons of Anak who are still there. However, the tribe of Benjamin does not complete their mission. They fail to drive out the Jebusites who live in Jerusalem. As a result, the Jebusites continue living alongside them in the city, even to this day. The descendants of Joseph, which include the tribes of Ephraim and Manasseh, also step into the battle. With the Lord's help, they take control of Bethel. They find a man from the city who shows them the way in. In return for his help, they spare him and his family. That man later travels to the land of the Hittites, where he builds a new city and names it Luz, the same name as the place he once lived. The second half of the chapter turns more serious. It lists the tribes that fail to fully remove the people from their allotted lands. The tribe of Manasseh does not drive out the people from Bethshan, Tanach, Dor, Iblem, or Megiddo. The Canaanites continue to live among them. Even when Israel becomes stronger later on, instead of removing the people, they put them under forced labor. The tribe of Ephraim does not drive out the Canaanites in Gezer. Zebulun allows the Canaanites to stay in Kitron and Nahalol, but forces them into labor. Asher completely fails to remove the Canaanites from cities like Akko and Sidon, and ends up living among them instead. Naphtali cannot remove the people from Beth Shemesh and Beth Anath. They settle among the locals, but the locals are subjected to forced labor. Dan faces a more difficult situation. The Amorites drive the tribe of Dan back into the hill country and do not allow them into the valleys. The Amorites remain strong in the area of Mount Heres, Aijalon, and Shalbim. However, when the house of Joseph grows stronger, they manage to press the Amorites into submission. But they still live in the land. Chapter 1 ends on a warning note. The people have not fully obeyed the Lord's command to remove the nations from the land. They allow them to stay, they compromise, and in doing so, they leave a door open for future trouble. Chapter 2 begins with the voice of warning growing louder. An angel of the Lord appears and comes up from Gilgal to Bochim. The angel speaks directly to the people, reminding them of what the Lord had done, bringing them out of Egypt and into the promised land. He reminds them of the covenant God made. I will never break my promise with you. But he also reminds them of their part. You must not make covenants with the people in this land. You must tear down their altars. Then comes the question, why have you not obeyed me? The message does not end there. The angel says, since you have done this, I will no longer drive these people out before you. They will be thorns in your sides, and their gods will become traps for you. The people are heartbroken by this declaration. They begin to weep loudly. That place becomes known as Bochim, which means weeping, and they offer sacrifices to the Lord there. After this, the story returns briefly to the memory of Joshua. It confirms once again that he had died and was buried in Timnath Heres, in the hill country of Ephraim. The people who had known him stayed faithful during their lifetimes. They had witnessed the power of the Lord firsthand and stayed true. But once that generation was gone, the next group grew up with no knowledge of the Lord. They did not know what he had done for Israel. This lack of connection and awareness leads them to drift away completely. The people begin doing what is evil in the sight of the Lord. They turn to the worship of Baal, the false gods of the nations around them. They abandon the Lord who had brought them out of slavery and begin chasing after other gods. They bow to them and serve them. This turning away deeply offends the Lord. Because of their rebellion, the Lord allows them to be defeated by their enemies. He no longer blesses them with victory. No matter where they go, they find themselves surrounded by trouble. The hand of the Lord is against them, and they suffer deeply. Even in this painful state, the Lord does not completely abandon them. He raises up judges, leaders who step in to help them when they are overwhelmed. These judges help rescue the people from their enemies, but the people do not truly change. They refuse to listen to the judges and keep running after other gods. Their disobedience becomes a habit. Whenever a judge is in place, the Lord supports them and brings deliverance to the people. But when the judge dies, the people return to their former ways. They sink even lower into sin than they had before. They will not give up their stubborn habits or their corrupt behavior. At this point, the Lord speaks again. He declares that since the people have broken the covenant He gave them and have chosen not to listen, He will stop removing the remaining nations. He will no longer drive them out as He had before. Instead, the Lord chooses to use those nations as a test. He leaves them in place, not only as a consequence of Israel's actions, but to challenge them. He wants to see whether the people will follow His ways or not. Chapter 2 ends with this challenge hanging in the air. The Lord has not given up on His people, but He will no longer protect them from the consequences of their choices. The nations that remain will test their hearts and reveal whether they are truly willing to walk in obedience or fall once again into the same destructive cycle. Chapter 3 begins by explaining why certain nations were left in the land. These nations were not left there by accident. The Lord allowed them to remain for a specific purpose, to test the people of Israel. The nations included the Philistines, the Canaanites, the Sidonians, and the Hivites, who lived in the mountains of Lebanon, stretching from Mount Baal-Hermon all the way to the entrance of Hamath. God was not failing to clear them out. Instead, He used their presence to see whether the Israelites would follow His commandments, the ones He had clearly spoken through Moses. It was also for a second reason, so that the new generation of Israelites, those who had grown up after the days of conquest, would learn what it meant to engage in warfare. These younger Israelites had not seen battle the way their elders had. Life had become settled, peaceful, and easier in some ways. But God knew they needed to understand the weight of struggle, the value of dependence on Him, and the discipline that comes from defending what is rightfully given by the Lord. Instead of driving these nations out, the Israelites began to live among them. They moved in and settled beside the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. This was not a peaceful coexistence that honored the Lord's commands. It was a compromise. Soon the Israelites began intermarrying with these groups. They gave their daughters to foreign men, and they took the daughters of those nations as wives. Through these unions, something far more dangerous happened. They began to serve the foreign gods of the people they lived with. This was exactly what the Lord had warned them against. As their hearts turned away from the Lord, they began to worship false gods like the Baals and the Asherahs, names that represented idols and fertility gods common among the surrounding nations. This betrayal deeply offended the Lord. It was not simply a matter of poor judgment. It was disobedience that broke the special relationship between Israel and their God. In response, the Lord allowed them to fall under the control of a foreign ruler. A king named Cushan-Rishathaim rose to power. He ruled over a region called Aram-Naharaim, which was part of Mesopotamia. The Lord handed the Israelites over to this king, and they served him for 8 long years. This was a painful season, marked by oppression and a loss of freedom. Eventually, the people cried out to the Lord. In their suffering, they remembered who they belonged to, and the Lord, in His compassion, raised up a deliverer. His name was Othniel, the son of Kenaz, who was the younger brother of Caleb. Othniel was not just a brave man, he was chosen and filled with the Spirit of the Lord. When the Spirit came upon him, he stepped into leadership and became a judge over Israel. Othniel led the people into battle against Cushan-Rishathaim. With God's power working through him, Othniel defeated the enemy and freed Israel from its grip. After this victory, the land experienced peace. For 40 years, there was no war, and the people lived in safety under Othniel's leadership. But in time, Othniel died, and as soon as he was gone, the people returned to their old ways. They once again did what was evil in the Lord's sight. This time, the Lord allowed another king to rise against them. His name was Eglon, and he ruled over Moab. Eglon did not act alone. He made an alliance with two other enemy nations, the Ammonites and the Amalekites. Together they launched an invasion. They crossed the Jordan River and captured Jericho, which was also known as the City of Palms. This was a hard defeat for the Israelites. Once again, they were forced into submission. They served King Eglon for 18 years. The Israelites cried out once more to the Lord, and once more God responded. He raised up another deliverer, a man named Ehud. Ehud was the son of Gera, from the tribe of Benjamin. What made him unique was that he was left-handed, a detail that would play a key role in what was about to happen. Ehud was chosen to bring a tribute to King Eglon. This tribute was a required payment from Israel to show their loyalty and submission. But Ehud had a different plan in mind. Before setting out, he crafted a double-edged sword about 1.5 feet long. He strapped it to his right thigh, hiding it under his clothes. This was clever, because most guards would expect a weapon on the left thigh of a right-handed man. Ehud brought the tribute to the king, who is described as a very fat man. After the tribute was delivered, Ehud sent the men who had helped carry it back home. But he himself turned around when he reached the carved idols near Gilgal. He went back to the king and said, "I have a secret message for you." King Eglon, curious and unsuspecting, dismissed all his attendants and gave Ehud a private audience. Alone in the upstairs room, Ehud approached the king and said, "I have a message from God for you." As the king stood up to hear it, Ehud reached with his left hand, pulled out the sword from his right thigh, and plunged it into the king's belly. The blade sank deep, and the fat closed over the handle. Ehud did not pull the sword out. The entire weapon disappeared inside the king's body, and his bowels emptied right there in the room. Ehud slipped away, quietly locking the doors behind him. Later, the servants came to check on the king. They found the doors locked and assumed he was using the bathroom. They waited for a long time. Finally, when they grew concerned, they took the key, opened the doors, and found their king dead on the floor. By this time, Ehud had escaped. He passed the idols and made his way safely to Sarah. Once there, he blew a trumpet in the hill country of Ephraim. The people of Israel gathered around him. Ehud stood before them and said, "Follow me. The Lord has given your enemies, the Moabites, into your hands." The people followed him with confidence. They seized control of the crossing points of the Jordan River, cutting off escape routes. No one from Moab was able to flee. That day, Israel killed about 10,000 strong and capable Moabite warriors. None escaped. It was a complete victory. After that, Moab became subject to Israel, and the land experienced peace for 80 years. The chapter ends with a short note about a judge named Shamgar, the son of Anath. It simply says that he struck down 600 Philistines using only an ox goad, a tool used for guiding cattle. Though brief, this moment highlights how even a simple farming tool can become a weapon in the hands of someone chosen by God. Chapter 4 opens with a now familiar pattern. After Ehud died, the people of Israel once again did what was evil in the eyes of the Lord. So the Lord allowed them to fall under the control of Jabin, a king of Canaan who ruled from a city called Hazor. The commander of Jabin's army was a man named Sisera, who lived in Harosheth Hagoyim. Sisera was a powerful enemy. He had 900 iron chariots, advanced war machines for that time. With them he oppressed the people of Israel cruelly for 20 years. The Israelites had no strength to fight back, so once again they cried out to the Lord for help. At that time, a woman named Deborah was serving as a judge over Israel. She was also a prophetess. People came to her for decisions and guidance, and she would sit under a tree called the Palm of Deborah, located in the hill country of Ephraim. She was a wise and trusted leader. One day Deborah sent for a man named Barak. He was the son of Abinoam and came from Kadesh in the land of Naphtali. When he arrived, Deborah gave him a message from the Lord. "Go and take 10,000 men from Naphtali and Zebulun and lead them up to Mount Tabor. The Lord will draw Sisera out to the river Kishon with his chariots and army, and he will give him into your hands." Barak replied with hesitation. He said, "If you go with me, I will go. But if you do not go with me, I will not go." Deborah agreed to go with him, but she also told him something important. She said, "Because of the way you are doing this, the honor will not go to you. The Lord will hand Sisera over to a woman." So Deborah went with Barak to Kadesh. He gathered 10,000 men from the tribes of Naphtali and Zebulun, and they marched up to Mount Tabor. Deborah was with them every step of the way. Meanwhile, a man named Heber the Kenite had separated from his people and pitched his tent near Kadesh. His family was at peace with King Jabin. This would soon become important. When Sisera heard that Barak had taken position on Mount Tabor, he moved quickly. He gathered all 900 of his iron chariots and every man in his army. They marched from Harosheth Hagoyim to the river Kishon. Then Deborah said to Barak, "Get up! Today is the day the Lord will deliver Sisera into your hands. The Lord has already gone ahead of you." So Barak went down the mountain with his 10,000 men, and the Lord threw Sisera's army into confusion. Barak and his men completely defeated them. Sisera jumped down from his chariot and ran away on foot. Barak chased the enemy all the way back to Harosheth Hagoyim. Not a single one of Sisera's soldiers survived. All were struck down with the sword. Sisera ran to the tent of Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite. Because of the peace between Heber's family and King Jabin, Sisera thought this was a safe place. Jael came out and greeted him kindly. She said, "Come in, my lord, do not be afraid." So Sisera entered the tent, and Jael covered him with a blanket. He asked for some water, but she gave him milk instead. Then she tucked him in again. Before falling asleep, Sisera told her, "Stand at the door. If anyone comes and asks if a man is here, say no." Believing he was safe, he fell asleep. But Jael had other plans. While he slept, she took a tent peg and a hammer, crept quietly up to him, and drove the peg through his temple. It went through his head and into the ground. Sisera died there, in her tent, not at the hands of a warrior, but by the hand of a courageous woman. Later, Barak came looking for Sisera. Jael came out to meet him and said, "Come, and I will show you the man you are looking for." He entered the tent and saw Sisera lying dead, the tent peg still in place. That day marked a major shift. The Lord used Deborah's leadership, Barak's obedience, and Jael's courage to bring down the powerful King Jabin of Canaan. From that point forward, Israel grew stronger and stronger until they finally overcame and destroyed Jabin completely. After the victory God gave to Israel through Deborah, Barak, and Jael, a song rises in celebration. This is not just a victory chant, it is a heartfelt poem of praise, known as the Song of Deborah. It stands out in Scripture as one of the oldest songs ever recorded in the Bible. Deborah and Barak, the son of Abinoam, sing this song together. Their voices are united, not to boast in their strength, but to honor the Lord who brought them through. The song begins with gratitude, not just for the result of the battle, but for the hearts that chose to rise up. They sing, "When the leaders took the lead in Israel, when the people willingly offered themselves, bless the Lord." They begin with thanksgiving for courage. Leadership rose, and people followed with willing hearts. They lift their voices higher and direct their praise beyond their nation. "Hear this, you kings. Listen, you rulers. I will sing to the Lord. I will make music to the Lord, the God of Israel." This moment is not just for Israel to remember. They want every ruler across the lands to know that this victory was from God and no one else. Then the song recounts how God moved. They remember, "O Lord, when you went out from Seir, when you marched from the land of Edom, the earth shook, the skies poured rain, the clouds poured down water." God's presence stirred the elements. Nature itself trembled. The battle was not just between armies. It involved heaven and earth. They speak of mountains shaking before the Lord. They recall Mount Sinai, not as a place of law this time, but as a place that trembled when God stood with his people. The Lord, the same one who once gave his commandments, now moved as a warrior for Israel. Then the song reflects on the time before God intervened. In the days of Shamgar, son of Anath, in the days of Jael, the highways were deserted. Travelers walked twisted paths. The roads were not safe. People hid and moved carefully. Fear filled the land and danger was everywhere. Life in the villages came to a standstill. Village life ceased in Israel until I, Deborah, arose, a mother in Israel. Deborah's role was not taken as a throne of power. She calls herself a mother, someone who stepped forward to protect, guide, and lift the people when they were at risk of falling apart. The song speaks plainly of the reason behind their weakness. They chose new gods, they sing, and war came to the city gates. Not a shield or spear could be found among 40,000 in Israel. Their turning away from the Lord left them exposed. There was no defense, not physically and not spiritually. Deborah's heart overflows with appreciation. "My heart is with the commanders of Israel, with the volunteers among the people. Bless the Lord." She honors those who stood up when it mattered. Their names and choices are now part of a song that echoes through history. She calls others to reflect. "You who ride on white donkeys, sitting on saddle blankets, and you who walk along the roads, consider this." It's an invitation. Whether rich or poor, noble or humble, everyone should pause and recognize what God has done. Joy returns to the land. They sing about the watering places, once silent, now filled with song. They recite the righteous acts of the Lord, they say. People gather and speak of God's justice and how he defended the villages of Israel. Peace allows people to return to the city gates. Normal life begins to flow again. Deborah tells how God called them to battle. "Wake up, Deborah, wake up and sing a song. Arise, Barak. Take your prisoners, son of Abinoam." The call was not just to arms, but to praise, to move forward with the awareness that God was with them. She sings how the brave ones came. "The nobles came down," she says. "The people of the Lord came to me with the mighty." God stirred their hearts, and those who once felt small now stood tall. She names the tribes that answered the call. From Ephraim came those whose courage was rooted deep. Benjamin followed, shoulder to shoulder. Leaders came from Machir. From Zebulun came those who carried the commander's staff. Issachar's princes stood beside Deborah. They followed Barak, steady and bold, into the valley. These were the ones who showed up when it counted. But not every tribe responded. She sings about Reuben. In the districts of Reuben, there was great searching of heart. Why did you stay among the sheepfolds, listening to the shepherds' flutes? Reuben hesitated, choosing comfort over courage. Gilead stayed on the far side of the Jordan River. Dan remained with his ships. Asher stayed along the coastline, dwelling quietly in his bays. These tribes are mentioned not with praise, but as a warning. They stayed still while others fought, yet some did not hesitate. Zebulun risked their very lives. So did Naphtali, on the heights of the battlefield. These tribes gave all they had. Their names are sung with honor. The battle is then told again, but now from heaven's view. The kings came and fought, the song says, but they gained no silver, no reward. This fight was not about riches. It was about freedom. It was about God's name. They continue. From the heavens, the stars fought. From their courses, they fought against Sisera. Even the stars joined in. Creation itself turned against the oppressor. Then they sing. The river Kishon swept them away. The ancient river, the river Kishon. Nature became the weapon. Deborah lifts her voice. March on, my soul. Be strong. Her heart is stirred. She sees clearly now how God turned everything in their favor, earth, water, sky, and people. Even the enemy's horses are mentioned. Then thundered the horses' hooves, galloping, galloping go his mighty steeds. The enemy charged in strength, but it was not enough. Power and pride could not withstand the will of the Lord. Then the song takes a sharp turn. It speaks of Meroz, a town that did not help. Curse Meroz, says the angel of the Lord. Curse its people bitterly, because they did not come to help the Lord against the mighty. This line shows that neutrality is not always harmless. In a time of crisis, inaction is a choice. And now comes the praise for one unexpected hero. Most blessed of women be Jael, the wife of Heber the Kenite, they sing. She is lifted above all others for her brave act. She welcomed Sisera, gave him milk, made him feel safe, and then brought him down with her own hand. They describe the moment poetically. Her hand reached for the tent peg, her right hand for the workman's hammer. She struck Sisera. She crushed his head. He sank, fell, and lay still at her feet. This was not a usual battlefield. It was a quiet place of decisive justice. The song then turns to a different scene. They picture Sisera's mother looking out the window. She waits, wondering why her son has not returned. Her attendants try to comfort her. They suggest he is dividing the spoils of war, taking cloth and treasures. But the reader knows he will never return. Her hope is false. Finally, Deborah ends the song with a final statement. So may all your enemies perish, O Lord, but may those who love you shine like the sun when it rises in its strength. Her words bring the song to a close with a contrast: destruction for those who stand against God and shining strength for those who walk with Him. And then the chapter concludes with peace. The land had rest for 40 years. After all the chaos, the battle, and the bravery, calm returned. Peace came not because of military strategy or human plans, but because the Lord brought it. After the peace that had followed Deborah's leadership, time passed, and the people began to drift again. Once more, the Israelites did what was wrong in the eyes of the Lord. They abandoned His ways, and because of their disobedience, the Lord allowed them to fall under the control of the Midianites. This time, the oppression lasted for 7 years. The Midianites were merciless. They treated the Israelites with cruelty, leaving them broken and afraid. Life became unbearable. The people couldn't live in the open anymore. They fled to the hills and made their homes in mountain caves, hollowed-out strongholds, and small shelters hidden from sight. They lived in fear, just trying to survive each day. Every time they planted seeds in the ground, hope would rise for a brief moment. But as the crops grew, the Midianites would come. They didn't come alone. They came with the Amalekites and other groups from the east. They moved like a swarm, covering the land, and every time they ruined everything. They stole or destroyed the crops, leaving the people with nothing. These raiders would pitch their tents in the land and bring all their animals, camels, cattle, and donkeys. They invaded the fields and stripped them bare. There was no food left behind, not even for livestock. It was as if locusts had covered the land, only these were people. They were so many, and their force was so strong that the Israelites were completely powerless to stop them. In this state of misery and hunger, the Israelites finally cried out to the Lord. They had nothing left to rely on. But before the Lord sent someone to rescue them, he sent them a messenger, a prophet. This prophet reminded them of everything God had already done for them. He said, "This is what the Lord, the God of Israel, says. I brought you out of Egypt, out of the land where you were slaves. I rescued you from the hand of those who oppressed you. I drove them out before you and gave you their land." The prophet continued with a clear message from a God. "I am the Lord your God. Do not worship the gods of the Amorites in whose land you now live. But you have not listened to me." These words were meant to open their hearts, to remind them of their true source of strength and why they had fallen. Now the story turns to a man named Gideon. He is not introduced as a leader or a warrior. He is found doing something unusual, threshing wheat in a wine press. Normally, wheat was threshed out in the open, where the wind could separate the grain from the chaff. But Gideon was hiding. He was in the wine press to keep his harvest hidden from the Midianites. This moment captures the deep fear the people were living in. As Gideon works in silence, something unexpected happens. The angel of the Lord comes and sits down under a tree in Ophrah. It is the tree that belongs to Joash, Gideon's father. The angel watches Gideon and then speaks, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." These words seem out of place. Gideon is hiding, working quietly to avoid being seen, yet he is called a mighty warrior. Gideon responds with confusion. "If the Lord is with us, then why has all this happened to us?" he asks. He doesn't see any of God's wonders. He only sees trouble. "Where are all the miracles our fathers told us about?" he asks. "Didn't the Lord bring us out of Egypt? But now the Lord has abandoned us and given us into the hand of Midian." His voice carries pain and doubt. He feels alone and forgotten. Then the Lord speaks directly to him. "Go in the strength you have and save Israel from Midian's hand. Am I not sending you?" This is not a suggestion. It's a calling. But Gideon can't see how this could be possible. He looks at himself and says, "But how can I save Israel? My family is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least in my entire family." He feels unqualified and small. The Lord replies, "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites as if they were just one man." God is not asking Gideon to go alone. He promises to be right there with him. But still, Gideon is unsure. He asks for a sign. "If I have truly found favor with you, then show me a sign that it is really you speaking to me." Gideon then asks the angel to wait while he prepares an offering. He goes quickly and cooks a young goat. He also bakes some unleavened bread using flour. He places the meat in a basket and pours the broth into a pot. Then he brings it all out to the angel under the oak tree and presents it on a large stone. The angel tells him to pour the broth over the meat and bread and place it all on the rock. Gideon obeys. Then the angel of the Lord touches the offering with the tip of the staff in his hand. Suddenly, fire rises from the rock. It consumes the meat and the bread completely. At that moment, the angel disappears from sight. Gideon now knows without any doubt that he has seen the angel of the Lord. He is filled with fear and cries out, "Alas, sovereign Lord, I have seen the angel of the Lord face to face. He believes he will die because of it." But the Lord speaks gently to him again. "Peace," he says, "do not be afraid. You are not going to die." With his heart still stirred, Gideon builds an altar to the Lord there. He names it, "The Lord is Peace." That place remains a mark of that moment, a quiet reminder that even in the middle of fear, God brings peace. That same night, the Lord gives Gideon a new assignment. It is not a military task, but a spiritual one. He is told to take his father's second bull and tear down the altar of Baal that belongs to his family. Beside it there is also an Asherah pole, a wooden symbol of a false goddess. He is told to destroy both. Then he must build a new altar to the Lord on top of that same hill. He is to offer the bull as a burnt sacrifice using the wood from the Asherah pole as fuel. Gideon obeys, but he is still afraid of what might happen. So instead of doing it during the day, he takes 10 servants with him and carries out the task at night. They work quietly, tearing down the altar of Baal, cutting down the Asherah pole, and building the new altar just as God commanded. The next morning, the townspeople wake up and see what has happened. The altar to Baal is gone. The pole is cut down, and in its place is a new altar with the remains of a burnt offering still on it. The people are furious. They investigate and quickly find out who did it: Gideon. They march to Joash's house and demand that he hand Gideon over. They want him dead, but Joash stands up for his son. He says, "If Baal really is a god, then let him defend himself. Let him deal with the one who broke down his altar." His words calm the crowd. From that day on, Gideon is given a new name, Jerub-Baal. It means "let Baal contend," because he challenged the false god and lived. Soon after, the Midianites, Amalekites, and other eastern peoples gather again. They cross over and camp in the valley of Jezreel, ready to make war once more. But this time, something changes. The Spirit of the Lord comes powerfully upon Gideon. He takes a trumpet and blows it loudly, calling his own tribe of Abiezer to join him. Gideon also sends messengers to the tribes of Manasseh, Asher, Zebulun, and Naphtali. One by one, these tribes respond and come together to prepare for battle. The people are rallying behind him. Still, Gideon needs more assurance from God. He speaks again to the Lord and asks for a specific sign. He says, "If you will save Israel through me, as you have said, then let me place a wool fleece on the threshing floor. In the morning, let the fleece be wet with dew, but the ground around it dry." He goes to sleep, and in the morning he checks. The fleece is soaked. He wrings out a bowl full of water. The ground is dry. God has answered. Yet Gideon speaks once more, very humbly. "Do not be angry with me," he says. "Let me ask just once more. This time let the fleece be dry and the ground covered with dew." That night, God honors the request. When Gideon wakes up, the fleece is completely dry, but the ground around it is soaked with dew. Early in the morning, Gideon, who is also called Jerub-Baal, gathers his troops and sets up camp beside the spring of Harod. From this location they can see their enemies, the Midianites, who are camped just north of them in the valley below, near the hill of Moreh. Although Gideon has seen many signs from the Lord and is strengthened in faith, what happens next is unexpected. God tells him something unusual. "You have too many men for me to deliver Midian into their hands." The Lord explains that if the Israelites win with such a large army, they might boast and say, "My own strength has saved me." God does not want them to claim victory on their own terms. To prevent this, God gives Gideon a direct instruction. He tells him to speak to the army and say, "Anyone who trembles with fear may turn back and leave Mount Gilead." Gideon obeys this command and shares the message with the soldiers. When the announcement is made, 22,000 men step away and return home. Only 10,000 remain. It is a surprising and dramatic reduction in numbers, but the Lord is not finished. God speaks to Gideon again. He says, "There are still too many men." He instructs Gideon to bring the remaining 10,000 men down to the water. There, God will perform a test. The Lord tells Gideon that he will show him exactly who should stay and who should be sent home. So Gideon leads his men to the stream and watches as they begin to drink. God gives him very specific guidance. Some men kneel and drink directly with their mouths in the water, while others bring water to their mouths with their hands and lap it like a dog. The Lord instructs Gideon to separate the men based on how they drink. When the counting is done, only 300 men had used their hands to bring the water to their mouths. The rest had knelt down. Then God speaks again. He says, "With the 300 men who lapped, I will save you and give the Midianites into your hands. Send the rest home." Gideon obeys once again. He allows the other 9,700 men to go home, keeping only the 300. He takes their provisions and trumpets and begins preparing for the mission with this tiny group. Far below them in the valley, the Midianite camp spreads out, a vast force that still seems overwhelming. That night, the Lord speaks once more. "Get up," he says. "Go down against the camp, because I am going to give it into your hands." But then God adds something else, knowing Gideon's heart. "If you are afraid to attack, go down to the camp with your servant Purah, and listen to what they are saying. After that, your hands will be strengthened for the attack." This shows the Lord's care. He provides assurance even before Gideon asks for it. Gideon takes Purah with him and quietly makes his way down to the edge of the enemy camp. What he sees is staggering. The Midianites, the Amalekites, and others from the east are camped in great numbers. The scripture says their numbers are like locusts across the land, with camels that could not be counted. The sight alone would have made any leader tremble. As Gideon listens from the shadows, he overhears something astonishing. A man inside the enemy camp is speaking to a friend. He says, "I had a dream. A round loaf of barley bread came tumbling into the Midianite camp. It struck a tent with such force that the tent overturned and collapsed." His friend immediately responds with an interpretation. "This can be nothing other than the sword of Gideon, son of Joash, the man from Israel. God has given Midian and the whole camp into his hands." At that moment, Gideon's heart is overwhelmed. He bows low in worship right there on the edge of the enemy camp. The fear that had held him before is now replaced with courage. He rises and returns quickly to his camp. He calls out to his men, "Get up! The Lord has given the Midianite camp into your hands." Gideon immediately puts a plan into action. He divides the 300 men into 3 groups of 100 each. He gives every man a trumpet and an empty jar. Inside each jar is a torch. It is a unique and unexpected strategy. No swords, no armor, only light and sound. He gives them simple instructions. "Watch me," he says. "Follow my lead. When I get to the edge of the camp, do exactly as I do." Then he adds, "When I and all who are with me blow our trumpets, then you blow yours too all around the camp and shout, 'For the Lord and for Gideon.'" They arrive at the edge of the enemy camp just as the middle watch begins. This is the time of night when one group of guards is replaced with another. It is a moment of shift, when alertness is low and confusion is likely. Gideon and his group blow their trumpets and smash the jars in their hands. Suddenly, the dark valley is lit with fire as the torches blaze, and the air is filled with the sound of trumpets. All three companies blow their trumpets and shout together, "A sword for the Lord and for Gideon!" It is a powerful sound that echoes through the night. The Midianites are completely disoriented. In the darkness, with lights flashing around them and trumpets sounding from every side, they fall into panic. The Lord causes confusion throughout the enemy camp. The Midianite soldiers begin turning on one another with their swords. No one knows who the enemy is anymore. Terror spreads, and the entire army begins to scatter. The Midianites flee, running toward Beth-shittah in the direction of Zererah and all the way to the border of Abel-Meholah near Tabbath. Gideon sees that the enemy is breaking and does not wait. He sends messengers throughout the hill country of Ephraim. The message is urgent: "Come down against the Midianites and seize the waters of the Jordan River ahead of them." The tribe of Ephraim responds quickly. They come down and take control of the Jordan River crossings. They also pursue the fleeing enemy. Along the way, they capture two of Midian's key leaders, Oreb and Zeb. Oreb is killed at the rock that would later be named after him, and Zeb is killed at the winepress that would also bear his name. After the pursuit, the men of Ephraim cross the Jordan River and bring the heads of Oreb and Zeb to Gideon. The Lord had truly delivered Midian into their hands, not through numbers or force, but through obedience, courage, and his own power. As the battle ends and victory is within reach, the men of Ephraim come to Gideon, but not with celebration. Instead, they confront him angrily. "Why did you treat us this way?" they ask. "Why didn't you call us when you went to fight the Midianites?" They are offended. They feel left out of the battle and the glory that followed. But Gideon doesn't respond with pride or defensiveness. Instead, he answers them with humility and wisdom. He says, "What have I done compared to you? Aren't the leftover gleanings of Ephraim better than the full harvest of Abiezer?" He reminds them that they were the ones who captured the Midianite commanders, Oreb and Zeb. "What was I able to do in comparison to you?" he adds. His calm words ease their anger, and the tension between them fades. With that settled, Gideon and his 300 men do not stop. Though they are exhausted, they keep pursuing the remaining enemy forces. Their goal now is to capture the Midianite kings, Zebah and Zalmunna. On their way, they pass through a town called Succoth. There, Gideon asks the town leaders, "Please give my men some bread. They are tired, and we are still chasing Zebah and Zalmunna, the kings of Midian." But the leaders of Succoth do not support him. They mock Gideon's request and say, "Do you already have Zebah and Zalmunna in your hands? Why should we give food to your men?" Their doubt is clear, and they offer no help. Gideon responds firmly. "Just for that," he says, "when the Lord gives Zebah and Zalmunna into my hands, I will come back and tear your flesh with thorns and briars from the desert." He leaves the town with his men, still determined. Next, they arrive at another town, Peniel. Gideon makes the same request, asking for food and support. But once again, the people refuse to help. They give him the same answer as those in Succoth. Gideon responds with another warning. "When I return in victory, I will tear down this tower." Leaving Peniel, Gideon and his men cross the Jordan River and continue the pursuit. Though their numbers are small and they are running on little energy, they press forward. The enemy's army is now reduced to about 15,000 men. These are all that remain of the combined eastern forces that had once numbered 120,000. Gideon decides to take a hidden path. He moves through places called Nobah and Jogbehah. With the element of surprise on his side, he launches an attack. The enemy camp feels safe and unguarded, but Gideon strikes quickly and throws them into confusion. He captures Zebah and Zalmunna, and their army scatters in panic. Gideon returns from this victory just before sunrise. On the way back, he stops at Succoth. There, he captures a young man from the town. He asks the boy to write down the names of the city's officials and elders. The boy lists 77 names. Gideon then walks into the town, holding Zebah and Zalmunna as prisoners. He tells the people of Succoth, "Here are the kings you mocked me about. You said, 'Do you already have their hands in your possession?'" With that, Gideon punishes the town's leaders as he said he would. He takes desert thorns and briars and strikes them with them, fulfilling his earlier warning. He moves on to Peniel. True to his word, Gideon tears down the tower that stood in the town, and in the process, he kills the men who opposed him. His judgment is swift and serious. He had asked for help in a time of national danger, and they refused. Then Gideon turns to the two captured kings, Zebah and Zalmunna. He asks them, "What kind of men did you kill at Tabor?" They answer honestly, "They looked like you, each one like a prince." Gideon's expression changes. "Those were my brothers," he says, "the sons of my own mother. As surely as the Lord lives, if you had spared them, I would not kill you." He turns to his oldest son, Jephthah, and tells him to carry out the execution, but the boy is still young. He is afraid and cannot bring himself to strike the kings. Zebah and Zalmunna then speak directly to Gideon. They mock him, saying, "Come do it yourself. As the man is, so is his strength." Without hesitation, Gideon steps forward. He kills both kings and takes the ornaments off their camels' necks, decorations that showed their royal status. After all these events, the people of Israel approach Gideon with a request. They say, "Rule over us, you, your son, and your grandson, because you have saved us from the Midianites." It is an invitation to become their leader, to establish a dynasty. But Gideon refuses. He answers clearly, "I will not rule over you, and my son will not rule over you. The Lord will rule over you." He points the people back to God as their true king. Still, he asks for one thing. He says, "Let me make a request. Each of you give me an earring from your share of the plunder." The Midianites had worn gold earrings because they were from a group that traditionally wore them. The people agree. They spread out a cloth, and each person throws an earring onto it. The total weight of the gold comes to about 43 pounds. This does not include the royal ornaments, the pendants, or the purple garments worn by the defeated kings. Nor does it count the chains that were around the camels' necks. With the gold, Gideon makes something, a ceremonial garment called an ephod. He places it in his hometown Ophrah. But this becomes a turning point. The ephod, meant to honor God, becomes a trap. The people begin to worship it. It becomes an object of false devotion and leads Gideon and his family into spiritual trouble. Even so, the land has peace. Midian is defeated and does not rise again during Gideon's lifetime. For 40 years, the nation enjoys rest. Gideon goes back home and lives in quietness. During his life, he has many wives, and together they have 70 sons. He also has a concubine who lives in Shechem. She gives birth to a son, and they name him Abimelech. In time, Gideon, also called Jerub-Baal, dies after a long life. He is buried in the tomb of his father Joash in the town of Ophrah. But after his death, the people fall back into their old ways. They turn away from the Lord and begin worshiping Baal once more. They even choose a new false god and call him Baal-berith. They forget the Lord, the one who had delivered them from all their enemies. They do not show any kindness or loyalty to Gideon's family, even though he had risked everything to bring them peace. After the death of Gideon, a man named Abimelech, one of Gideon's many sons, sought power in a very different way from his father. Abimelech's mother was from Shechem, and she was not Gideon's wife but his concubine. Seeing an opportunity to gain control, Abimelech traveled to Shechem to meet with his mother's relatives and the city leaders. His goal was to convince them that he alone should rule, instead of sharing power with all 70 of Gideon's sons. He posed a persuasive question. Would it not be better for one man to rule over them instead of 70? And he reminded them that he was their own flesh and blood. Abimelech's relatives supported his ambition and persuaded the leaders of Shechem to back him. The leaders agreed and gave him 70 silver coins taken from the temple of Baal-berith. Abimelech used this money to hire a group of reckless, violent men who would follow him without question. With this band of hired men, Abimelech went to Ophrah, Gideon's hometown, and carried out a brutal plan. He murdered all 70 of his half-brothers on a single stone. It was a calculated and cold-blooded execution. Only the youngest son, Jotham, escaped by hiding. After this bloody massacre, the leaders of Shechem and a nearby area called Beth Millo gathered together. They made Abimelech their king beside a significant landmark, the great tree near the pillar in Shechem. But the story did not end there. Jotham, the only surviving son of Gideon, heard about what had happened. Filled with grief and anger, he climbed Mount Gerizim and called out a warning to the people of Shechem below. Jotham spoke in the form of a parable. He said that the trees once tried to appoint a king over themselves. They first asked the olive tree, but it refused, not wanting to give up its valuable oil. Then they turned to the fig tree, which also refused, unwilling to lose its sweetness. Next, they asked the vine, which declined as well, not wanting to stop producing wine. Finally, they asked the thorn bush. The thorn bush said, "If you really want me to be king, come and take shelter in my shade. But if not, then let fire come out of the thorn bush and destroy even the mighty cedars of Lebanon." This parable was Jotham's way of warning the people. He told them that if they had acted in truth and justice when making Abimelech their king, then may they find joy in him, and may he find joy in them. But if they had acted out of cruelty and betrayal, then may fire come out from Abimelech and destroy them, and fire from them destroy Abimelech. After delivering this message, Jotham fled and went to live in Beer, hiding from the danger that now surrounded him. Abimelech's rule lasted for 3 years, but it was not peaceful. God allowed a spirit of conflict to rise between Abimelech and the leaders of Shechem. Tensions grew, and the trust between them crumbled. The leaders of Shechem began to resist his rule and even set up ambushes in the hill country to rob travelers. This unrest was not random. It was divine justice unfolding. The blood of Gideon's sons cried out, and now judgment began to fall on both Abimelech and the people who supported him. During this time, a new figure appeared in Shechem, Gaal, the son of Ebed. Gaal and his relatives moved into the city, and the people welcomed them. As time passed, they began to trust Gaal more. One day, during a festival held in honor of their god Baal, the people ate, drank, and openly cursed Abimelech. Emboldened by the crowd and the celebration, Gaal shouted, "Who is Abimelech that we should serve him? Isn't he just the son of Gideon? Shouldn't we rather serve the descendants of Hamor, who built Shechem? If I were in charge, I'd drive Abimelech out." Gaal even challenged Abimelech directly, saying, "Bring your army." However, Zebul, the governor of Shechem and a supporter of Abimelech, was also present. Though he didn't show it, he took Gaal's words seriously. Quietly, he sent a message to Abimelech, warning him of the rebellion stirring in the city. Zebul advised Abimelech to come by night with his army and lie in wait in the fields outside the city. When morning came, Gaal would be unprepared, and Abimelech could strike. Abimelech followed this plan. He brought his men and divided them into 4 groups, surrounding Shechem in the darkness. At sunrise, Gaal stood at the city gate and noticed movement in the distance. He said to Zebul, "Look, people are coming down from the mountains." Zebul tried to dismiss it, saying, "You're just seeing shadows." But Gaal insisted that he saw people approaching. Then Zebul turned on him and said, "Where is your bold talk now? Go out and fight!" So Gaal led the people of Shechem into battle. but Abimelech's forces were ready. He attacked swiftly and pushed Gaal's men back to the gate. Many were killed. Gaal himself was driven from the city, along with his relatives. Zebul had removed his rival and reaffirmed his loyalty to Abimelech. The next day, the people of Shechem, thinking the conflict was over, went out to the fields to work. Abimelech, hearing this, set another trap. This time he divided his army into 3 groups. One group stayed hidden near the city gates while the other 2 launched a surprise attack on the workers in the fields. The assault was devastating. Abimelech then led his forces into the city. He killed many of the inhabitants, destroyed the city structures, and scattered salt over the ruins to prevent the land from being used again. Hearing of this destruction, the remaining leaders of Shechem took shelter in a stronghold inside the temple of Baal-berith. They believed the temple would protect them. But Abimelech was relentless. He gathered wood from the surrounding forest, had his men pile it around the temple stronghold, and set it on fire. The entire tower burned, killing about 1,000 people, both men and women, who had sought refuge there. Abimelech then turned his attention to a town called Thebez. He captured the city quickly, but once again the people ran to a strong tower in the center for safety. Abimelech prepared to burn this tower down as well. As he approached the entrance to set it on fire, a woman dropped a large millstone from the top of the tower. It struck Abimelech on the head and crushed part of his skull. Wounded and knowing death was near, Abimelech did not want the shame of being killed by a woman. He called to his armor-bearer and said, "Draw your sword and kill me, so people will not say I was killed by a woman." His servant obeyed, and Abimelech died. When the people of Israel saw that Abimelech was dead, they all returned to their homes. His violent and self-serving rule had come to an end. The chapter concludes by saying that God brought justice. The evil Abimelech committed in killing his brothers came back on his own head. Likewise, the leaders of Shechem were punished for helping him. In the end, the very violence they chose was the same violence that destroyed them. After the violent rule of Abimelech, Israel found itself in desperate need of stability. The nation had just endured the cruelty of a man who crowned himself king and brought destruction upon his own people. The land was wounded, not only by war, but by deep betrayal. It was in this heavy silence, after so much pain and fear, that a new leader quietly emerged. His name was Tola, the son of Puah, from the tribe of Issachar. His grandfather was named Dodo. Though the scriptures do not record any dramatic victories or speeches from Tola, his role was significant. He was not like Abimelech, who rose by violence, but was a man God raised up to bring healing. Tola lived in the hill country of Ephraim, in a place called Shamir. This region had once seen conflict, but under Tola's leadership, it became a place of restoration. He served as judge over Israel for 23 years. While there are no long stories or battles recorded during his time, the length of his service speaks volumes. It points to a season of peace and order, something Israel deeply needed. His quiet, faithful presence helped hold the nation together when it could have fallen apart. The meaning of his name, Tola, may seem small. It refers to a worm or scarlet, but God often works through what seems insignificant. After his time of service, Tola died and was buried in Shamir. Following Tola's leadership, another judge arose. His name was Jair, and he came from Gilead, a region on the eastern side of the Jordan River. Jair's time as a judge is remembered not just for how long he ruled, but also for the influence of his family. He had 30 sons, and each son rode a donkey, a symbol of wealth and authority. These sons were not simply privileged, they each governed a town. In total, there were 30 towns under Jair's family, and these became known as Havoth Jair, meaning villages of Jair. The fact that these towns still carried his name long afterward shows the lasting impact he had. Jair ruled for 22 years. His leadership was marked by strength, structure, and a broad family influence that helped maintain peace. When he died, he was buried in Kamon, a place in Gilead. However, peace did not last. After Jair's death, the people of Israel once again lost their way. They didn't simply drift. They turned away completely from God. They abandoned their covenant with the Lord and gave their devotion to foreign gods. They served the Baals and Ashtoreths, as well as the gods of Aram, Sidon, Moab, the Ammonites, and the Philistines. This wasn't confusion, it was rebellion. The people had once known the God who brought them out of slavery and gave them their land, yet they chose to worship false gods that offered nothing in return. This rejection of God led to serious consequences. The Lord, angry with their betrayal, stepped back from them. His protection was removed. As a result, the Philistines and the Ammonites rose up against Israel. These were enemies that God had previously held back, but now they were allowed to advance. Their presence was not just military, it was a judgment, a direct response to the people's disobedience. The Ammonites, in particular, began to crush and oppress the people living in Gilead, the same area from which Jair had come. For 18 years, the Israelites in that region suffered greatly. They were the ones who had once shown bravery by settling in lands close to enemy territory, but now they were overwhelmed by constant attack. Their suffering was a painful reminder that life without God's guidance brings devastation. But the attacks didn't stop with Gilead. The Ammonites crossed the Jordan River and began launching strikes against the central and southern tribes, Judah, Benjamin, and Ephraim. The entire nation trembled under the pressure. Fear spread from town to town. Crops were no longer safe, homes could not be defended, and the people felt vulnerable and ashamed. The land that once celebrated victories now wept under defeat. In their desperation, the Israelites finally cried out to the Lord. They admitted their sin. "We have sinned against you. We have abandoned our God and worshipped the Baals." Their words were more than complaints. They were confessions. The people recognized that their real problem wasn't the strength of their enemies, but their own unfaithfulness. However, this time, God responded differently. He reminded them of their history, saying, "Did I not save you from Egypt, from the Amorites, the Ammonites, the Philistines, the Sidonians, the Amalekites, and the Maonites? Each time you cried out, I delivered you." God was not being cold. He was holding up a mirror. He showed them how often he had rescued them before. But now, he wanted them to see that their cries had become shallow and repetitive, tied only to their suffering rather than real devotion. Then God said something painful. "But you have forsaken me and served other gods, so I will no longer save you. Go and cry out to the gods you have chosen. Let them save you when you are in trouble." These words stung. They exposed the truth that Israel's repentance had often been about escaping hardship, not truly loving God. This time, however, the people seemed to change. They didn't just say they were sorry, they acted. They replied, "We have sinned. Do whatever seems good to you, but please rescue us today." And then they removed all the foreign gods from among them and returned to worshiping only the Lord. Their actions backed up their words. Their hearts were finally turning, not just their voices. What happened next shows the deep compassion of God. The Bible says that He could no longer bear Israel's misery. These few words say so much. Even though they had failed Him repeatedly, God's heart was moved by their suffering. He is not distant. He is just. But He is also full of mercy. He could not watch His people suffer without stepping in. While all this was taking place, the Ammonite army was preparing to invade again. They camped in Gilead, ready to strike. In response, the Israelites also gathered their forces and camped at Mizpah. This was not just a military decision, it was a spiritual one. Mizpah had been a place of gathering and renewal in the past. Now, it has become the place where a nation waits for direction. As the people stood at Mizpah, a crucial question rose among them. Who will lead us? Who will begin the fight against the Ammonites? Whoever does will become the head over all of Gilead. That question echoed through the camp. They had repented. They had returned to God. Their enemies were strong, and their need was great. Now they needed someone called, someone willing to rise up and lead them forward. The chapter ends right there, with that question left unanswered. It sets the stage for what comes next. The people were waiting. God was watching. A leader was needed, not for glory or gain, but to guide a broken people back to strength and freedom. A man named Jephthah lived in the region of Gilead. He was known as a mighty warrior, someone strong in battle and respected for his bravery. But his story began with pain. Jephthah was the son of a prostitute, and though his father was Gilead, the rest of the family rejected him. His brothers made it clear that he was not welcome. They drove him out of their home and said, "You will not share in our inheritance because you are the son of another woman." His very identity was used against him, and despite his bloodline, he was pushed aside and cast out. With nowhere to belong, Jephthah fled to the land of Tob. There, in exile, he built a different kind of life. Though he was unwanted by his own family, he did not let bitterness consume him. Instead, he attracted a group of adventurers, strong, bold, and daring men, who gathered around him and followed his lead. In the wilderness, far from the acceptance he deserved, Jephthah became a leader. He was no longer a castaway, but the head of a growing group that respected his strength and courage. Time passed, and trouble came to the land of Israel. The Ammonites rose up to make war against Gilead, the very region that had once rejected Jephthah. Faced with this serious threat, the elders of Gilead realized they needed a strong leader. They remembered Jephthah and went to find him in Tob. They said to him, "Come and lead us in battle against the Ammonites." But Jephthah, still carrying the weight of his past, responded, "Didn't you hate me and drive me away from my father's house? Why are you coming to me now that you're in trouble?" The elders answered with humility, "Yes, we turned against you, but now we need you. Please come and fight for us, and if you do, you will become our leader over all the people of Gilead." Jephthah didn't rush into the decision. He asked clearly, "If I return with you and the Lord gives me victory, will I truly be your head?" The elders agreed and made a vow before the Lord at Mizpah. There, in the presence of God, Jephthah was officially made commander of their army. Jephthah didn't start with swords and soldiers. First, he tried diplomacy. He sent messengers to the king of Ammon and asked a simple question: "Why are you attacking our land?" The king of Ammon responded by accusing Israel of stealing land when they came out of Egypt. He said, "From the Arnon to the Jabbok, to the Jordan River, that land belongs to us. Give it back peacefully." Jephthah responded with a message that was both historical and firm. He explained that Israel did not take land from Ammon or Moab. When they came out of Egypt, they asked permission to pass through Edom and Moab peacefully and were denied. But when they reached the land of the Amorites, King Sihon refused passage and attacked. Israel defended itself, and with God's help, they defeated Sihon and took his land. That land became Israel's by right of victory, not theft. Jephthah then made a pointed argument. He said, "If your god Chemosh gave you land, wouldn't you keep it? So why shouldn't we keep the land the Lord has given us?" He made it clear that Israel had not provoked Ammon and that the attack was unjust. He ended his message with this powerful line, "I have not wronged you, but you are wrong to fight me. Let the Lord, the judge, decide today who is right." But the king of Ammon refused to listen. He rejected Jephthah's message and prepared for war. Then something powerful happened. The Spirit of the Lord came upon Jephthah. Filled with God's strength and purpose, he traveled through Gilead and Manasseh, gathering troops and calling the people to arms. Before going into battle, Jephthah made a vow to God. He said, "If you give me victory over the Ammonites, then whatever comes out of the door of my house to meet me when I return will be offered to you as a burnt offering." Jephthah led Israel into battle, and the Lord gave him victory. He crushed the Ammonites with a powerful assault, striking down their forces and reclaiming peace for Israel. The people rejoiced, and the land was delivered from its enemy. But as Jephthah returned home in triumph, his joy was shattered. His daughter, his only child, came out to greet him, dancing with tambourines. She was celebrating her father's victory, unaware of the vow he had made. The moment he saw her, Jephthah tore his clothes in agony and cried out, "Oh no, my daughter, you have brought me low. You are the cause of great sorrow to me, for I have made a vow to the Lord, and I cannot take it back." His words were not anger at her, but deep heartbreak. He knew what he had promised, and now it was his own flesh and blood standing before him. His daughter, full of strength and grace, did not argue. She accepted what had been spoken. "Father," she said, "you made a promise to the Lord. Do with me as you have said, because the Lord has given you victory over your enemies." She had only one request. "Give me 2 months to go to the hills with my friends and mourn, because I will never marry." Jephthah agreed, and she went away to grieve with the other young women. After 2 months, she returned to her father, and though the Bible does not describe in detail what happened next, it says that Jephthah did to her as he had vowed. It is one of the most heartbreaking stories in the book. A father who rose from rejection to victory ended up paying a heavy price for a vow made in desperation. From that time on, a tradition was born in Israel. Every year, the young women of Israel would go out for 4 days to remember Jephthah's daughter. They honored her courage, her loyalty, and the cost of her father's promise. Her story became a part of Israel's memory, not just of war and leadership, but of love, sacrifice, and sorrow. After Jephthah returned from the devastating battle against the Ammonites and fulfilled the painful vow that cost him his daughter, Israel faced another crisis, but this time the threat came from within. The men of Ephraim, a tribe known for their pride and influence, gathered in anger. They crossed over to Zaphon, the region where Jephthah lived, and confronted him with fury burning in their voices. They demanded an answer. "Why did you go to fight the Ammonites without calling us to join you?" they said. "Why did you treat us as if we didn't belong to the same people? Because of this insult, we are going to burn down your house with you still in it." Their words were not just accusations, they were threats. But behind all their shouting and anger was wounded pride. The tribe of Ephraim had a history of being at the center of Israel's victories, and now they felt ignored and sidelined. Their ego couldn't accept that a major battle had taken place without their involvement, or more importantly, without their recognition. Jephthah responded with calm and clarity. He reminded them of the facts. "When I and my people were fighting the Ammonites, I called for your help. You didn't come. You left us to face the enemy alone." He made it clear that their complaint was false. "When I saw that you would not save us, I risked my life and went into battle anyway. The Lord gave me the victory. So now that the danger is over, why have you come to fight me?" His words exposed their selfish motives. They had not come to fight an enemy. They had come to reclaim their pride. But the confrontation did not end with words. The anger of Ephraim turned into violence. A civil war erupted between the Ephraimites and the Gileadites, Jephthah's people. The Gileadites, seasoned from their recent battle with the Ammonites, now had to defend themselves against their own brothers. Under Jephthah's command, they stood strong and fought back with determination. The fighting was intense, and in the end, the Gileadites defeated the Ephraimites. During the battle, old insults resurfaced. The Ephraimites had mocked the Gileadites in the past, calling them renegades, as if they were traitors who had no real connection to the larger family of Israel. It was a bitter insult meant to isolate and shame. But in this moment it became clear who stood firm and who faltered. The Gileadites had been underestimated, but they proved their strength in the heat of the battle. As the defeated Ephraimite soldiers fled, the Gileadites moved quickly to secure the fords of the Jordan River, the only safe passage back into Ephraimite territory. It was a strategic move. Anyone trying to escape would have to pass through this narrow crossing, and the Gileadites were ready. But catching the enemy wasn't enough. They needed a way to identify who was truly from Ephraim. So they created a simple but clever test. When a man approached the river crossing, the Gileadites would ask, "Are you an Ephraimite?" If he said no, they would ask him to say the word Shibboleth. To anyone else, it was just a word. But the Ephraimites could not pronounce it correctly. They would say Sibboleth instead, dropping the esh sound. That one small difference gave them away. It was a brutal system. Any man who failed the test was immediately captured and executed. There was no second chance, no trial, only judgment. By the time the battle ended, 42,000 men from the tribe of Ephraim had been killed. It was not a victory to celebrate. It was a tragedy. These were not foreign enemies. They were fellow Israelites. The bloodshed was not caused by a foreign threat, but by pride and division within the nation. After this civil war, Jephthah continued to serve as judge over Israel, but not for long. His leadership had been marked by both courage and loss. He had defended the people against external enemies, but also had to face hostility from his own nation. In total, Jephthah judged Israel for 6 years. Then he died, and he was buried in a town in Gilead. The Bible describes it as his city, perhaps a place that bore his name or one where his legacy lived on. Following Jephthah's death, leadership passed to a series of judges, each with their own story. First came Ibzan of Bethlehem. He judged Israel for 7 years. Ibzan had a large family, 30 sons and 30 daughters. He arranged marriages for all of them, giving his daughters to men from outside his clan and bringing in wives for his sons from different regions. These connections were more than personal choices. They likely served to strengthen ties between different tribes and communities. When his time as judge ended, Ibzan died and was buried in Bethlehem. Next came Elon, a leader from the tribe of Zebulun. He judged Israel for 10 years. The scriptures do not detail his actions or events during his leadership. Sometimes, the silence in the text suggests that the land experienced peace. It was a quieter season, and Elon's rule may have been steady and without conflict. After he died, he was buried in Aijalon, in the territory of Zebulun. After Elon, Abdon son of Hillel became judge. He came from Pirathon, a town in the hill country associated with the Amalekites. Abdon served as judge for 8 years. Like Ibzan, he had a large and respected family, 40 sons and 30 grandsons. All of them rode on 70 donkeys, which was a symbol of wealth, status, and peaceful authority. Donkeys in those days represented nobility and calm rule, not chaos or war. Abdon's leadership appears to have been marked by prosperity and social order. When he died, he was buried in Pirathon, his hometown. Chapter 12 draws to a close by giving us a glimpse into how Israel functioned during this period. Judges came from different regions and backgrounds. Some were warriors who fought battles. Others were wise leaders who used family alliances to preserve unity. Whether they led for many years or only a few, each one had a role in keeping the people from falling into total chaos. The story of Jephthah and those who followed him reminds us how quickly division can rise even after victory. The danger outside the nation is serious, but the danger within, division, jealousy, and pride, is just as destructive. Yet through it all, God continued to raise up leaders. Some came from rejection, others from wealth, but each was chosen for a time, each one stepping into a role when the people needed guidance most. Once again, the people of Israel turned away from what was right. They chose to do what was evil in the eyes of the Lord, as if they had forgotten all the lessons of their past. Despite the mercy and rescue they had received time and again, they drifted back into disobedience. Because of this, the Lord handed them over to the Philistines. For 40 years, the Philistines ruled over them with cruelty and oppression. This was not a short season. It was one of the longest stretches of suffering Israel ever endured. And for most of that time, there was no one to lead, no one to fight back, no one to give hope. The land sat in silence, waiting for God to move again. In a small town called Zorah, within the territory of the tribe of Dan, there lived a man named Manoah. He and his wife had been together for years, but they carried a quiet sorrow. His wife was barren, unable to have children. In those days, this was more than just personal heartbreak. It was often seen as shameful, a silent grief that followed a couple wherever they went. Yet their lives, though marked by this pain, were about to become part of something greater. One day, while Manoah's wife was alone, the angel of the Lord appeared to her. His presence was radiant, and his message was life-changing. He said, "Though you have been barren and childless, you will conceive and give birth to a son." These words must have pierced her heart with joy. A dream long buried was suddenly being resurrected by the very voice of heaven. But there was more. The angel gave her a set of commands, specific and serious. He said, "Be careful not to drink wine or any fermented drink, and do not eat anything unclean." These instructions were not ordinary. They were part of a vow. The child she would carry was to be a Nazirite, someone specially dedicated to the Lord. The angel explained, "No razor must touch his head, for the boy is to be consecrated to God from the womb. He will begin the work of saving Israel from the Philistines." This was no ordinary child. He would be a vessel of deliverance, set apart before he was even born. Filled with awe and urgency, the woman ran to tell her husband. She said, "A man of God came to me. He looked like an angel. His appearance was unforgettable. I didn't ask him where he came from, and he didn't tell me his name. But he said I would give birth to a son, and that I must not drink wine or eat anything unclean, because the boy will be a Nazirite from the womb to the day of his death." Manoah listened carefully. He trusted his wife, but he needed more clarity. So he prayed to the Lord, asking, "Please let the man of God come again and teach us how to raise this child." It wasn't enough for Manoah to simply believe. He wanted direction, not just for the promise, but for the responsibility that came with it. God heard his prayer. Once again, the angel of God appeared, this time to Manoah's wife while she was in the field. Her husband was not with her, so she quickly ran to find him. "The man who appeared to me before is back," she exclaimed. Manoah followed her, eager and full of anticipation. When they arrived, Manoah asked, "Are you the one who spoke to my wife?" The angel replied simply, "I am." Then Manoah asked the question burning in his heart, "What is to be the rule for the boy's life and work?" The angel repeated the earlier instructions with clarity. Your wife must do everything I have told her. She must not eat anything that comes from the vine, nor drink wine or fermented drink, and she must not eat anything unclean. She must observe everything I commanded." Humbled by the encounter, Manoah wanted to honor the messenger. He said, "Please stay so we can prepare a young goat for you." But the angel declined, saying, "Even if you prepare food, I will not eat it, but if you prepare a burnt offering, offer it to the Lord." At that point, Manoah still did not realize that this was not just a man, but the angel of the Lord himself. Manoah, still unaware of the angel's true identity, asked, "What is your name, so that when your words come true, we may honor you?" The angel answered, "Why do you ask my name? It is wonderful." The name itself pointed to something far greater, something divine, something beyond understanding. Then Manoah prepared a young goat and a grain offering and placed it on a rock. He offered it to the Lord. As the flames rose from the altar, something incredible happened. The angel of the Lord ascended in the fire. Manoah and his wife saw this with their own eyes and immediately fell face down to the ground. At that moment, the angel disappeared. He did not appear again. Now Manoah fully understood what had just taken place. Terrified, he said to his wife, "We are going to die. We have seen God." But his wife, with a calm voice and clear mind, said, "If the Lord intended to kill us, he would not have accepted our offering. He would not have shown us all this or told us these things." Her faith brought peace to his fear. Soon after, the promise was fulfilled. The woman gave birth to a son, just as the angel had said. She named him Samson. As the boy grew, the Lord blessed him, and the Spirit of the Lord began to move within him. It started while he was in a place called Mahane-dan, between Zorah and Eshtaol. God's plan was now in motion. The boy born out of barrenness, set apart from the womb, would begin a journey filled with strength, struggle, and divine purpose. This was just the beginning of Samson's story. As Samson stepped into adulthood, the Spirit of the Lord rested upon him, giving him strength beyond that of any ordinary man. But even with this divine power, Samson did not always walk in wisdom. His decisions were often impulsive and driven by desire. One day, while traveling down to Timnah, a town under Philistine control, he noticed a young woman who caught his eye. She was a Philistine, a part of the nation that continued to oppress Israel. Yet Samson felt drawn to her and immediately wanted to marry her. When he returned home, he went straight to his parents and said, "I saw a Philistine woman in Timnah. Get her for me as my wife." His parents were taken aback. They were not only surprised, but also deeply concerned. They asked, "Isn't there a woman among our people you could marry? Must you go to the Philistines, our enemies, to find a wife?" But Samson was determined. He replied, "Get her for me. She is the right one for me." In the original Hebrew, he said, "She is right in my eyes," showing that he was thinking more with his feelings than with spiritual discernment. However, the story reveals something greater behind Samson's choice. The Bible notes that his parents did not realize this desire was being used by the Lord. Even though Samson's motives were flawed, God was setting the stage for a confrontation with the Philistines. God was working through Samson's choices, even his weaknesses, to move forward with his plan to free Israel from oppression. As the family traveled to Timnah to arrange the marriage, they passed through a vineyard. There, a young lion suddenly rushed toward Samson. In that instant, the Spirit of the Lord came upon him in power. Without hesitation, Samson grabbed the lion and tore it apart with his bare hands. It was an act of sheer strength, done as easily as someone might tear apart a small goat. Yet Samson told no one about it, not even his parents. Sometime later, as they returned to finalize the wedding arrangements, Samson decided to revisit the spot where he had killed the lion. Inside the carcass, he found something strange and unexpected. A swarm of bees had made a hive, and there was honey. He reached in with his hands, scooped out the honey, and ate it as he walked. He even shared some with his parents, but he didn't tell them where it came from. The scene was simple, but symbolic. A sweet reward hidden inside a place of death and danger. At the wedding feast, 30 Philistine men were chosen to be Samson's companions. Wanting to challenge them and perhaps to show off his wit, Samson proposed a riddle. "Let me tell you a riddle," he said. "If you solve it within 7 days, I'll give you 30 linen garments and 30 changes of clothes. But if you can't, then you'll owe me the same." The men accepted the challenge, eager for the game and the potential reward. The riddle was this: out of the eater, something to eat; out of the strong, something sweet. The riddle pointed back to the lion and the honey, but of course the Philistines had no way of knowing that. 3 days passed, and they couldn't solve it. By the 4th day, frustration turned into desperation. The men went to Samson's new wife and threatened her. They said, "Trick your husband into telling you the answer, or we will burn you and your father's household. Did you invite us here just to steal from us?" Fear took hold of her. Under the pressure, she began to cry and plead with Samson. "You don't love me! You're keeping secrets from me! You haven't even told me the answer to your riddle!" Samson tried to reassure her, saying, "I haven't even told my father or my mother. Why should I tell you?" But the crying didn't stop. She wept every day throughout the feast. On the 7th and final day, Samson could no longer take it. He gave in and told her the answer. She ran straight to the Philistine men and passed the secret to them. Before the sun set that day, they came to Samson with the answer. With smirks on their faces, they said, "What is sweeter than honey? What is stronger than a lion?" In that moment, Samson understood what had happened. He knew he had been betrayed by the very woman he had chosen to marry. He responded with a bitter proverb, "If you had not plowed with my heifer, you would not have solved my riddle." Samson's anger boiled over. The Spirit of the Lord came upon him again, this time fueling a different kind of action. He went down to Ashkelon, another Philistine city, and struck down 30 men. He took their clothing and returned with it to pay the debt to the men who had answered his riddle. His actions were swift, harsh, and violent, a reaction not just to losing a bet, but to being humiliated and betrayed. Burning with anger, Samson left the feast unfinished and went back to his father's house. He walked away from the wedding, carrying the weight of insult and betrayal. But the story didn't stop there. While he was gone, his wife was given to one of the men who had been his companion during the celebration. This act of betrayal, done without his knowledge, would soon fuel another chapter of vengeance and conflict. The fire that had been lit in Samson's heart was only beginning to spread. Some time after the storm of betrayal and rage from his failed wedding, Samson returned with hopes of making peace. He brought with him a young goat, a traditional gift that symbolized goodwill and reconciliation. This gesture showed that his anger had cooled and that he was ready to mend what had been broken. He went straight to his wife's father's house and said, "I want to go into my wife's room." But instead of finding a warm welcome, he was met with shocking news. Her father stood in the doorway, blocking him, and explained, "I was sure you hated her, so I gave her to one of your companions." The words landed like a heavy blow. Then, as if that would soften the pain, the man added, "But look, her younger sister is even more beautiful. Take her instead." The attempt to offer a replacement only added to the insult. For Samson, it wasn't just about love. It was about being mocked and humiliated again by the Philistines. His anger flared up immediately. This time, he made his intentions clear. "Now I have every right to get even with the Philistines, and I will make sure they feel it." His words weren't empty threats. They carried the weight of someone who had been pushed too far. And what followed was not just revenge, it was a display of creativity, intensity, and unstoppable strength. Samson went out and captured 300 foxes, a feat that alone showed his determination and physical ability. He tied them together in pairs, tail to tail, and fastened a burning torch between each pair. Then, at just the right moment, he lit the torches and released the foxes into the Philistine fields during harvest. The flames quickly spread through the grain, setting fire to their wheat, their vineyards, and their olive groves. This was no minor attack. It was a direct hit on their entire economy. Their food, their drink, and their oil were all consumed by fire. Samson had struck where it hurt the most. The Philistines were furious. They demanded to know who had done this. The answer came quickly. Samson, because his father-in-law gave his wife to another man. In retaliation, the Philistines carried out a horrible act. They burned Samson's wife and her father to death. The same threat they once made during the riddle at the wedding had now come true, and it ended in tragedy. Samson's fury burned hotter than before. "Because you have done this," he said, "I won't stop until I've taken revenge on you." And with that, he attacked the Philistines with great force. The Bible describes it as a great slaughter, fierce and unrelenting. After unleashing his wrath, Samson withdrew to a cave in the rock of Etam. It was a remote place, a shelter where he could hide and be alone. But the conflict didn't end there. The Philistines weren't done. They moved their army into Judah and set up camp at a place called Lehi. The people of Judah, confused and afraid, asked them, "Why are you attacking us?" The Philistines answered plainly, "We've come to capture Samson. We want to do to him what he did to us." They were focused on retaliation, and nothing else would satisfy them. In response, 3,000 men from Judah went down to the cave where Samson was staying. They approached him cautiously and said, "Don't you know the Philistines rule over us? What have you done?" Samson answered with calm but firm words, "I only did to them what they did to me." But the men of Judah weren't there to argue. They had come with a purpose. "We've come to tie you up and hand you over to them," they said. Samson agreed to go with them, but he made one request. "Swear to me that you won't kill me yourselves." They promised, "We won't harm you. We'll only tie you up and hand you over." So they bound him with 2 new ropes, ropes that had never been used, and led him away from the rock. As they approached Lehi, the Philistines saw Samson being brought to them and began shouting with excitement. They thought they had won. But in that moment, the Spirit of the Lord came upon Samson with overwhelming power. The ropes around his arms snapped like burned twine, and the bindings fell from his hands like threads. Looking around, Samson saw a fresh jawbone of a donkey lying nearby. He picked it up and charged forward. With this unlikely weapon in hand, he struck down 1,000 Philistines. It wasn't a sword or spear, it was the jawbone of a donkey, turned into a weapon of deliverance by the Spirit of God. After the battle, Samson stood surrounded by the fallen and declared a poetic statement, "With a donkey's jawbone, I have made donkeys of them. With a donkey's jawbone, I have killed 1,000 men." The place where this happened became known as Ramath Lehi, which means Jawbone Hill. It was a name that would always remind people of the strength that had come through the power of God and the hand of one man. But victory did not make Samson invincible. After the battle, he was overwhelmed with thirst. Exhausted and near collapse, he cried out to the Lord. "You have given your servant this great victory," he said, "but now must I die of thirst and fall into the hands of the uncircumcised?" Even in his strength, Samson knew he was still human, dependent on God for every breath, every need. God heard his cry. At Lehi, God opened up a hollow place in the ground, and water flowed from it. Samson drank deeply, and his strength returned. He was revived. Because of this miracle, the spring was named An-Hakore, which means caller's spring, a reminder of the moment Samson called out and was answered. That spring remained there for generations. Samson went on to judge Israel for 20 years during the days of Philistine rule. His life was not just a series of battles. It was a journey filled with strength, emotion, conflict, and calling. He was a man marked by power, but also by personal struggle. And though his story was far from over, what had already unfolded made it clear he was not like anyone Israel had seen before. Some time had passed, and Samson found himself in Gaza, one of the 5 major cities controlled by the Philistines. It was a place known for its strong walls and enemy presence. While there, Samson visited a prostitute and stayed with her through the night. Word of his presence spread quickly through the city. The Philistines, eager to finally capture the man who had humiliated them so many times, gathered quietly around the city gates. They planned to ambush him at dawn and kill him when he tried to leave. But Samson did not wait until morning. In the middle of the night, he rose and went to the city gate. In an astonishing display of strength, he pulled up the heavy doors of the gate, along with the 2 gateposts and the locking bar across the top. He placed them on his shoulders and carried them away. Not just a few steps, but all the way to the top of a hill facing Hebron, about 40 miles away. It wasn't just a physical feat, it was a message, a statement of power. A man who could carry the gate of a city was not someone to be taken lightly. Later, Samson fell in love again, this time with a woman named Delilah, who lived in the valley of Sorek. This relationship would not just affect his heart, it would shape his destiny. Delilah, unlike Samson's previous connections, became a tool in the hands of his enemies. The rulers of the Philistines approached Delilah in secret. They saw her closeness to Samson as an opportunity. They offered her a large sum, 1,100 silver coins from each of them, if she could find out the secret of his strength. "Trick him," they said. "Find out what makes him strong so we can overpower him and finally tie him down." The money was too tempting to resist, and Delilah agreed to help. She began to press Samson. "Tell me the secret of your great strength," she said sweetly, "and how you can be tied up and subdued." Samson didn't take her seriously at first. He played along. "If I'm tied up with 7 fresh bowstrings that haven't dried, I'll become weak," he said. She tried it, and with Philistine men hidden in the room, she cried out, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you!" But Samson snapped the cords as if they were thin threads touched by fire. Frustrated, Delilah scolded him. "You lied to me! You made a fool of me! Tell me the real way!" Samson gave another false answer. "If I'm tied with new ropes that have never been used, I'll be as weak as anyone." Again she tried, and again he broke free effortlessly. Still not giving up, she pleaded, "You've mocked me again. Tell me how you can be subdued." This time, Samson said, "If you weave the 7 braids of my hair into the fabric on the loom and pin it, I'll lose my strength." Delilah did just that as he slept. But when she shouted the warning again, Samson woke up and ripped the loom apart. By now, Delilah was angry and humiliated. She challenged his love. "How can you say you love me when you won't tell me the truth?" she said. She pestered him daily, nagging until his spirit grew weary. She wore him down with persistence, not with swords or threats, but with unending pressure. Finally, Samson could take no more. He opened his heart and revealed everything. "No razor has ever touched my head," he said. "I've been dedicated to God as a Nazirite since birth. If my hair is cut, my strength will leave me, and I'll be as weak as any man." Delilah knew instantly this was the truth. She sent word to the Philistine rulers, "Come one more time. He has told me everything." They came quickly, bringing the silver with them. Delilah waited until Samson fell asleep with his head resting on her lap. Then she called a man to shave off the 7 braids of his hair. As the last lock fell, so did his strength. The man who once carried city gates now lay powerless. She shouted once more, "Samson, the Philistines are upon you!" He woke up and thought, "I'll go out like before and shake myself free." But he didn't realize the Lord had left him. His strength was not just in his hair, it was in the presence of God. And now that presence was gone. The Philistines seized him. They gouged out his eyes and bound him in bronze shackles. They took him back to Gaza and forced him to grind grain in the prison, doing the work of an animal. The mighty warrior was now blind, broken, and humiliated. But the story did not end there. The Bible says his hair began to grow again. It was a quiet statement, but it meant that something was stirring. What had been taken away was beginning to return. Not just his hair, but his calling. One day, the Philistine rulers gathered for a great celebration. They were offering sacrifices to their god, Dagon, saying, "Our God has delivered Samson into our hands." The crowd was large, full of rulers and citizens. They were filled with joy and wine, mocking the man who had once terrified them. They called for Samson to be brought out as entertainment. He was led by a servant to the center of the temple, placed between 2 large supporting pillars. The crowd laughed and jeered, not knowing they had placed him in the one spot where everything could collapse. Samson turned to the servant and whispered, "Put my hands where I can feel the pillars that hold up the building." He reached out, placing one hand on each column. Then he prayed, his last prayer. "Sovereign Lord, remember me. Strengthen me just once more. Let me, with one act, take revenge for my 2 eyes." With his arms stretched and his strength returning, Samson braced himself against the pillars. He cried out, "Let me die with the Philistines!" Then with all his might he pushed. The pillars cracked, the foundation shifted, the entire temple came crashing down. Thousands were inside, including all the rulers and about 3,000 more on the roof. In his death, Samson defeated more Philistines than he ever had while alive. The man who had once lost everything finished his story by becoming the tool of God's justice once again. His body was later recovered by his family. His brothers and relatives came and took him from the ruins. They buried him between Zorah and Eshtaol in the tomb of his father, Manoah. Samson had judged Israel for 20 years. His life was marked by strength, struggle, failure, and redemption. He was not a perfect man, but he was chosen. And through him, God reminded the world that even in weakness, he can still bring victory. There was a man living in the hills of Ephraim named Micah. He was not a leader, not a prophet, and not a judge. But his story offers a window into the spiritual confusion that had taken hold of everyday people in Israel. What we see in Micah's life is not a grand war or a mighty deliverance. It's something quieter, yet deeply troubling. It is the story of how ordinary people began to reshape the worship of God into something that suited their preferences instead of following his commands. Micah came to his mother with a confession. He said, "The 1,100 shekels of silver that were taken from you, the ones you cursed and spoke about in my hearing, I took them." And with those words, He returned the stolen money to her. Perhaps he had been haunted by guilt, or maybe he feared the weight of her curse. Whatever stirred his heart, he gave it back, and in doing so revealed something about his conscience. He had done wrong, and he knew it. Surprisingly, his mother didn't respond with anger. Instead, she said, "The Lord bless you, my son." Her words were filled with relief. The silver was returned, and the tension in their home seemed to lift. But then she made a decision that showed just how deeply confused their spiritual thinking had become. She declared, "I solemnly dedicate this silver to the Lord for my son, to make a carved image and a metal idol." It sounded religious, even generous, but it directly went against God's command not to make idols. This is what happens when people cling to religious forms while ignoring God's truth. Her intention may have sounded noble, but her action was rebellious. Micah returned the silver to his mother, and she took 200 shekels of it to a silversmith. The rest of the silver is never mentioned again. Perhaps it was kept for later use or simply held back, but the focus turns to what was made from those 200 shekels, a carved image and a cast idol. These objects were crafted and then placed inside Micah's home, not in a temple or tabernacle, but in his private residence, turning his house into a kind of shrine. Not content with just the idols, Micah went further. He created his own personal worship space. He built a shrine, added more household gods, and even made an ephod, a garment designed for priests to wear when serving before God. But Micah wasn't a priest, and his house wasn't the place God had chosen for worship. Still, he appointed one of his sons to serve as priest, putting together his own version of religion without any instruction or approval from God. Then comes a key line in the story. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did what was right in their own eyes. This one sentence explains not just Micah's actions, but the direction of the entire nation. Without spiritual leadership, people were inventing their own ways of worshiping, each one doing what seemed good to them. God's word was no longer guiding the community. Instead, personal opinion and convenience took its place. Soon after, a new character enters the story. A young Levite from Bethlehem in Judah set out in search of a better life. He was from the tribe designated to serve in the religious life of Israel, but he had no assigned role or place. His journey showed how even the priesthood had become disconnected from its purpose. There was no structure, no order, just wandering. As the young Levite traveled through the hill country of Ephraim, he came across Micah. Micah asked him where he was from, and the man answered, "I'm a Levite from Bethlehem in Judah, and I'm looking for a place to stay." This was a chance encounter, but for Micah it was the perfect opportunity to upgrade his private religion. Without hesitation, Micah offered the Levite a deal. "Live with me and be my priest," he said. "I'll give you 10 silver coins a year, a set of clothes, and food." It was a job offer disguised as spiritual service. Micah wasn't seeking God's will, he was hiring a man to fit his own setup. And the Levite, with no better options, agreed. He moved in and became like one of Micah's sons. With the Levite now serving in his home, Micah felt confident. He had the idols, the shrine, the ephod, and now a real Levite. In his mind, he had built something sacred. He had constructed a religion that looked and sounded close to what God had commanded. But it was missing one critical thing: obedience. Micah's final words in the chapter say it all. "Now I know that the Lord will be good to me, since this Levite has become my priest." To him, God's blessing was a reward for arranging the right ingredients: some silver, some idols, a priestly robe, and now a Levite. But true faith does not work like that. You cannot purchase God's favor or shape worship to suit your personal desires. This chapter isn't just about Micah. It's a mirror reflecting the confusion of an entire generation, people who still used God's name but had forgotten his voice. They didn't reject religion, they redesigned it, and in doing so they drifted far from the God they claimed to honor. In those days, Israel had no king. That statement appears again at the beginning of this chapter, not as a simple fact, but as a reminder of the deep confusion spreading through the land. Without a central leader or consistent spiritual direction, people were left to their own judgment. What follows is another painful picture, not of just one man's failure, but of an entire tribe drifting far from God's design. At this point, the tribe of Dan had still not fully settled in their assigned land. While most of the other tribes had begun to take possession of their territories, the Danites were still struggling. They had been given an inheritance long ago, but instead of trusting God to help them secure it, they looked elsewhere. They decided to seek out easier land, even if that meant attacking peaceful people who had done them no harm. To begin their mission, the Danites sent out 5 brave men, warriors chosen from the towns of Zorah and Eshtaol, to scout the land. Their instruction was simple: go and explore. They were not looking for land that God had promised, but for land that looked convenient. They were acting from strategy, not faith. During their journey, the 5 scouts passed through the hill country of Ephraim and arrived at the house of Micah, the same man who had built a shrine in his home, made idols, and hired a Levite to serve as his personal priest. The scouts stopped to spend the night, unaware at first of what they were about to encounter. Inside Micah's house, they heard the familiar voice of the young Levite. They recognized his accent and were surprised to find someone from the priestly tribe serving in such a strange setting. They asked, "Who brought you here? What are you doing in this place?" Their questions showed their confusion. It wasn't normal for a Levite to be living like this. The young man told them his story. "Micah hired me," he said. "I live here now, and I'm his priest." Instead of being sent by God or serving in the tabernacle, he had taken up a private ministry for one household. It was an arrangement based on personal benefit, not on divine calling. The scouts then made a request. "Ask God for us," they said. "Find out if our mission will succeed." They wanted a blessing, but they didn't want to ask God for direction. Instead, they were asking a compromised priest to give them a green light on a decision they had already made. The Levite answered with words they wanted to hear. "Go in peace," he said. "The Lord is with you on your journey." Whether he truly heard from God or not, we're not told. But his words gave the scouts the confidence they were looking for. The 5 men continued on and arrived at a town called Laish. What they found amazed them. The people there were living in peace, wealthy, calm, and without fear. They had no enemies threatening them and no strong allies nearby. They were completely unaware of the danger that was approaching. The scouts returned to their tribe and reported their findings. "We found a good place," they said. "Let's go take it. Don't hesitate. The land is spacious and full of opportunity. God has surely given it to us." Their words were filled with excitement, but not once did they mention obedience, justice, or God's instructions. So 600 armed Danites set out from Zorah and Eshtaol. They brought their families and all their possessions. Along the way, they camped near Kiriath Jearim, a place later called Mahane Dan, Camp of Dan. This camp became a landmark, remembered for generations. As they traveled, they returned to the house of Micah. The 5 scouts turned to the others and said, "Do you realize what's in this house? An ephod, household gods, a carved image, and a cast idol. You know what to do." Their tone suggested more than curiosity. They were planning to take it all. The 600 soldiers stood guard at the gate while the 5 scouts went inside. They entered Micah's house and began collecting the religious items. The young Levite came out to greet them, likely confused at first, but then the scouts made him an offer. "Be quiet. Come with us. Be our priest and our father. Isn't it better to serve an entire tribe than just one man?" The Levite didn't hesitate. The offer gave him more influence, more people to lead, and possibly more wealth. So he took the ephod, the idols, and joined them. His loyalty was not to God, it was to opportunity. The Danites set out again, placing their families and livestock in front of them. They were marching not only with weapons but with stolen objects they now called holy. Their priest was a man for hire, and their worship was based on theft. Micah soon realized what had happened. When he discovered that his idols and his priest were gone, he gathered some neighbors and went after the Danites. He caught up with them and shouted, demanding an explanation. The Danites turned to him and said, "Why are you chasing us?" Micah replied, "You took the gods I made and my priest. What else do I have?" His words revealed the weakness of his faith. His entire belief system had been built on things made by human hands, and now that they were gone, so was his peace. But the Danites gave him a harsh warning. "Be quiet, or some of our men might turn violent. You and your household could be killed." Micah saw he was outnumbered and outmatched. With nothing else to do, he turned and went home, defeated and empty. The Danites continued to Laish. The town was unguarded and the people were unaware of what was coming. The Danites attacked without mercy, killing everyone and burning the city to the ground. No help came for Laish. There were no allies nearby to defend it. Afterward, the Danites rebuilt the city and gave it a new name. They called it Dan, after their tribal ancestor. They settled there and made it their own. But instead of turning to God's true worship, they set up the idols they had taken from Micah. The Levite priest, now revealed to be Jonathan, the son of Gershom, served them. His descendants continued to be priests for the tribe of Dan until the land was later taken into captivity. So while the house of God remained in Shiloh, the Danites chose to create their own version of worship. It was built on stolen objects, led by a compromised priest, and rooted in rebellion. They called it religion, but it was something entirely different. It was the result of people doing what was right in their own eyes, without regard for what was right in God's eyes. In those days, Israel had no king. This familiar phrase opens chapter 19 with a heavy sense of meaning. It wasn't simply that there was no one on a throne. It meant the people lacked a spiritual compass. No leader stood to guide them toward what was right, and so everyone lived by their own judgment. Morality was twisted, justice was weak, and even among those who claimed to know God, there was confusion, compromise, and cruelty. The story begins with a Levite, someone who was supposed to serve God and uphold his law. But this Levite lived far from the central place of worship. He had taken a concubine from Bethlehem in Judah, not a wife in the full sense, but a woman treated as a secondary partner. This already showed the breakdown of how marriage and women were viewed. Something wasn't right in the way he saw relationships. The woman eventually left him. The Bible says she was unfaithful, but we're not told all the details. Maybe she was mistreated. Maybe she felt neglected. Whatever the reason, she returned to her father's house in Bethlehem and stayed there for 4 months. The silence between them grew long, but eventually the Levite decided to go after her. He took his servant and 2 donkeys and made the journey south. When he arrived, her father welcomed him warmly. It might seem strange given the situation, but in their culture, hospitality and restoring family honor were powerful values. The Levite stayed with them for 3 days, eating, drinking, and relaxing. On the 4th day he tried to leave, but the father said, "Have something to eat before you go." So he stayed another day. On the 5th day, the same thing happened again. The Levite tried to leave in the morning, but they delayed and delayed until it was late afternoon. Finally, the Levite said enough was enough. He packed up, took his concubine, and set out for home, even though the sun was already going down. They reached the area near Jebus, what would later become Jerusalem, but at that time it was still a Canaanite city. His servant said, "Let's stop here for the night." But the Levite refused. "We can't stay in a city that doesn't belong to our people," he said. "Let's push on to Gibeah or Ramah." He believed that being among fellow Israelites would be safer. He was wrong. They made it to Gibeah, a town in the territory of Benjamin, just as night was falling. They sat in the public square, waiting for someone to offer them a place to stay. In Israel, hospitality wasn't just good manners, it was a duty. But no one stepped forward. They were ignored. Finally, an old man came in from the fields. He wasn't originally from Gibeah. He was a fellow Ephraimite, like the Levite. When he saw the travelers sitting in the square, he asked, "Where are you from? Where are you going?" The Levite explained everything, how he was returning from Bethlehem, how no one had welcomed them, even though they had their own food and supplies. The old man immediately invited them in. "You must not stay in the square," he said. He knew what kind of evil crept through the streets at night. So he took them home, fed the donkeys, and gave them food and drink. For a moment it seemed the night would end peacefully. But then darkness took on a new shape. A group of wicked men from the city, men described as sons of Belial, meaning corrupt and lawless, gathered outside the house. They beat on the door and shouted, "Bring out the man who came to your house so we can have sex with him." Their intent was to shame and violate him. It was an act of violence and a dominance, not desire. The old man stepped outside, horrified. "Don't do this wicked thing," he pleaded. "He is my guest. Don't bring this disgrace upon us." But then he made a tragic and heartbreaking offer. "Here is my virgin daughter and his concubine. I'll bring them out to you. Do what you want with them, but don't harm this man." Even as he tried to stop one evil, the old man was willing to allow another. In that moment, the value of women was reduced to a bargaining chip. No one intervened. No one defended the helpless. The crowd outside refused to listen. The Levite, under pressure, desperate and afraid, took his concubine and pushed her out the door. The mob seized her. They abused her all night, one after another, until the morning. As the first light of dawn broke, they let her go. She crawled back to the house. As the sun rose, she collapsed at the entrance. Her hands reached for the door, but she could go no further. She lay there, silent, broken, possibly already dead. In the morning, the Levite opened the door, ready to continue his journey. He saw her there on the ground. "Get up," he said. "Let's go." But there was no response. She didn't move. He picked her up, placed her on his donkey, and began the journey home in silence. What he did next was unthinkable. When he arrived, he took a knife and cut her body into 12 pieces, one piece for each tribe. He sent them throughout the land, not to desecrate her, but to shock the nation awake. It was a brutal cry for justice, a message that could not be ignored. The people of Israel were horrified. Everywhere the parts arrived, people gasped in disbelief. "Nothing like this has ever happened in Israel," they said. "Not since we came into this land. Think about it. Speak up. We must do something." This was no longer just one man's tragedy. It was a national crisis. The evil that had been allowed to grow in the shadows had now shown its face, and it could no longer be ignored. In the aftermath of the Levite's shocking act, sending the dismembered body of his concubine throughout the land, Israel was awakened. The outrage was no longer confined to one town or one family. It was now a national crisis. The entire nation was stirred with grief, anger, and a demand for justice. A great assembly was called, gathering men from the furthest reaches, from Dan in the north to Beersheba in the south, and even from Gilead across the Jordan. All came together as one at Mizpah, united in purpose. Over 400,000 men armed for war stood before the Lord. It was a moment of heavy silence and sacred seriousness. Standing before this vast crowd, the Levite gave his testimony. He told what had happened in Gibeah. He did not soften his words. He said plainly, "The men of Gibeah wanted to kill me. They raped my concubine until she died. So I took her and sent her body throughout the land. I did this because of the disgraceful thing they had done in Israel." And then he called on the people to act. "Now all of you speak and decide what must be done." It was not just a story. It was a summons to respond. The people did not hesitate. They declared together, "None of us will return home until this evil is dealt with." They vowed to take action against Gibeah. From every tribe they selected men to provide supplies for the soldiers. 10 out of every 100 were appointed to serve the army. It was a full-scale military and spiritual campaign. But before going to battle, Israel sent a message to the tribe of Benjamin. They appealed to their brothers first. "Turn over the wicked men from Gibeah, so we can put them to death and purge the evil from Israel." It was a chance to prevent civil war, to do justice without bloodshed. But the tribe of Benjamin refused. Instead of handing over the guilty, they chose to protect them. The whole tribe gathered to defend Gibeah. They chose loyalty to their own over obedience to God. 26,000 Benjaminites armed themselves for war, including 700 elite fighters from Gibeah who were known for their skill. These 700 men were left-handed and could sling stones with deadly precision. Though they were few, they were fierce and confident. Israel, on the other hand, had 400,000 soldiers, an overwhelming force, but they still sought the Lord before the first attack. They went to Bethel and asked, "Who should lead the charge against Benjamin?" And the Lord answered, "Judah shall go first." Encouraged by this response, the Israelites went out the next day and launched their first assault. But the battle did not go as expected. The Benjaminites came out and struck down 22,000 Israelites. It was a staggering loss. That night, the Israelites wept before the Lord. They asked, "Shall we go again to fight Benjamin?" And the Lord said, "Go." So the next day they returned to the battlefield. But again they were struck down. 18,000 more fell. After 2 days, 40,000 Israelite warriors had died. The loss was unimaginable. Broken and grieving, the people came to Bethel again. This time they fasted. They sat before the Lord in tears. They brought burnt offerings and fellowship offerings. The Ark of the Covenant was there, and Phinehas, the grandson of Aaron, served as priest. With deep sorrow they asked, "Shall we go up again or shall we stop?" This time the Lord gave them a new answer. "Go, for tomorrow I will give them into your hands." With this promise, Israel prepared differently. They set an ambush around Gibeah. On the third day, the main army advanced just like before. As expected, the Benjaminites rushed out to meet them and began killing Israelites again. About 30 fell early in the battle. The Benjaminites thought they were winning once more. But this time, it was all part of the plan. While the Benjaminites pursued the Israelite army, the men in ambush rushed into Gibeah and set the city on fire. Smoke rose into the sky. The main Israelite army turned and fought with renewed strength. The Benjaminites saw their city in flames and realized they were trapped. Panic spread through their ranks. They tried to retreat toward the wilderness, but the Israelites chased them down. That day, 18,000 Benjaminites fell in battle. The survivors fled, but 5,000 more were struck down along the roads, and another 2,000 were killed in the chase. In total, 25,100 Benjaminites died, nearly the entire fighting force. Only 600 managed to escape. They fled to the rock of Rimmon and stayed there for 4 months. But Israel's anger was not yet finished. After the battle, they went through the remaining towns of Benjamin and destroyed them. They killed men, women, and animals. Every city they came to, they burned with fire. It was a total devastation. The tribe of Benjamin was nearly wiped out, not by outsiders or foreign nations, but by their own people. The cost of sin and division had reached its peak. One tribe was almost erased from the land, and while justice had been served, the weight of what had happened would hang heavy over the nation for years to come. After the devastating civil war that nearly destroyed the tribe of Benjamin, the people of Israel gathered once again at Mizpah. But this time, their weapons were set aside. They were not preparing for another battle. They were mourning what had already been lost. The fire of justice that once burned in their hearts had been replaced with the weight of grief. One of their own tribes, a part of their shared identity, had been brought to the edge of extinction. And now, the consequences of their passion and their promises stared them in the face. Before the war, they had made a solemn vow. No Israelite would allow his daughter to marry a Benjaminite. At the time, it seemed like a noble stand, a way to distance themselves from evil. But now, that very oath had become a trap. The 600 surviving men of Benjamin, hiding in fear at the rock of Rimmon, had no wives. Without women, there would be no future, no children, no families, no restoration. An entire tribe was now on the verge of vanishing, not because of war alone, but because of a vow made in anger. The people traveled to Bethel, the place where the Ark of God rested. There they sat and wept. Their voices rose to heaven as they cried out, "O Lord God of Israel, why has this happened? Why is one of our tribes missing from your people?" It was not just sadness, it was the pain of realizing that in trying to correct one wrong, they had created another. They offered sacrifices, built an altar, and sat before the Lord, not with pride, but with aching hearts. As they discussed what to do, a difficult question emerged. Was there any group among us that did not come to the assembly at Mizpah? They reviewed their earlier call to unity and discovered that no one from Jabesh-Gilead had joined the national gathering. In their desperation for a solution, they seized on this absence. If the people of Jabesh-Gilead had not taken part in the war or the vow, perhaps they could be treated as outsiders and punished. The decision was harsh. 12,000 warriors were sent to Jabesh-Gilead with this command: destroy the city, every man, every woman, every child, except for any virgin women. It was a brutal act, a misguided attempt to fix one problem by creating another. When the dust settled, 400 young women were spared. These were brought back and given to the men of Benjamin, but there were still 200 men without wives. Again, the leaders struggled. "We must not allow the tribe of Benjamin to be wiped out," they said, "but we cannot break our vow. We cannot give our daughters to them." So they came up with another plan, one that showed just how far Israel had drifted from God's ways. There was a festival coming up in Shiloh, a yearly celebration where young women would dance before the Lord. The leaders instructed the remaining Benjaminites to hide in the vineyards nearby. "When the young women come out to dance," they said, "each of you should rush out and seize one of them as your wife. Then take her and return to your land." It was a troubling solution, taking wives by force during a holy celebration. But the leaders justified it. If anyone complained, they would simply say, "We didn't break our vow because we didn't give our daughters to them. They were taken." So the 200 remaining men did as they were told. They waited in hiding. When the young women came out to dance, they sprang from the vineyards and took 200 of them back to the territory of Benjamin. There, they began to rebuild their homes, their families, and their future. The tribe of Benjamin slowly came back to life, not through peace or healing, but through desperate compromise. With the crisis resolved in the only way they knew how, the rest of the Israelites returned to their homes, scattered across the land. But the story ends with a familiar line, one that had echoed again and again throughout these chapters. In those days, Israel had no king. Everyone did what was right in his own eyes. This final sentence is not just a reflection on history. It's a mirror held up to a broken people. Without leadership, without obedience to God, the nation had fallen into a spiral where even their attempts to do what seemed right only deepened the wounds. The book of Judges does not end in triumph, but in a plea for something better, a longing for leadership rooted not in human pride but in divine truth. This is the end. If you found this video valuable, don't forget to give it a big thumbs up. It really helps share God's word with more people. And if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and turn on all notifications so you never miss out on powerful biblical teachings. Thanks for watching, and until next time, God bless you.